Just a quick content warning before we get into today's episode. Although Roger Rabbit is rated PG, it has quite a few adult themes. So I would consider it to be more of a PG-13 film. So just viewer discretion advised. The most ambitious live-action animation hybrid at the time, the inspiration for many other live-action animated hybrids that will continue to come, and in some ways the most ambitious movie ever, featuring animated characters from several different studios, and even having some original voice actors return. This is also a collaboration between multiple studios and multiple production teams. What makes Who Framed Roger Rabbit special, and how does it kind of stay in a weird cult classic zeitgeist, despite the fact that it was a hit at the time, but just kind of been forgotten now. Hello, my name is Em, and I am currently on a journey where I am watching every Disney animated movie and ranking them on a tier list with my husband. And I like to provide history before we get into our thoughts. So, Roger Rabbit and Who Framed Roger Rabbit is going to be a bonus episode. And I'm well aware this isn't technically Disney. It's Touchstone. But I decided to do it because I want to, and I can do what I want. So, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was released on June 21st, 1988. It stars Bob Hoskins as Eddie Valiant, Charles Fleischer as Roger Rabbit and Benny the Cab, Christopher Lloyd as Judge Doom, Stubby Kaye in his final film role as Marvin Acme. If you don't know who Stubby Kaye is, he played Nicely Johnson in Guys and Dolls. Kathleen Turner as Jessica Rabbit, Joanna Cassidy as Dolores, Alan Tilvern in his final film role as R.K. Maroon, Lou Hirsch as Baby Herman, Mel Blanc as basically all the Looney Tunes characters he voices, Mae Questel, who was OG Betty Boop, as Betty Boop. And the film is based on the book Who Censored Roger Rabbit by Gary K. Wolfe, published in 1981. I've heard that the book is very different. I'm not going to focus on the book very much and the differences between the book. I feel like there's other content creators who have done that. I think specifically Yesterworld has a good video that kind of talks about that. And the Walt Disney Company purchased rights to the book shortly after its publication, with the president at the time, Ron Miller, believing that it could be their next blockbuster. In 1982, Robert Zemeckis showed his interest in directing the project, but as his last two films had been box office flops, Disney declined. Between 1981 to 1983, test footage was developed with Daryl Van Critters as the animation director, Paul Reubens voicing Roger Rabbit. If you don't know who Paul Reubens is, he's Pee Wee Herman. Peter Renaday as Eddie, and Russi Taylor, who was the voice of Minnie at the time, as Jessica. And Jack Angel as Captain Cleaver. I don't know who Captain Cleaver is, because he's not in the final film. The project kind of went nowhere, but Michael Eisner, who was CEO after Ron Miller, revived the project in 1985. This was also around the time when Amblin Entertainment, which was Steven Spielberg's production company, was approached to produce the film along with Disney. That's right, guys. We got another Amblin Entertainment movie. If you haven't seen my American Tail video, I highly recommend watching it. I put quite a bit of work into it. This is also when Robert Zemeckis was hired as director after his successes of Romancing the Stone and Back to the Future, which I love Back to the Future. It's Back to the Future. I believe I've seen Romancing the Stone, but only once at like a friend's birthday party, I'd like to say. I can't remember. It was crazy. I also don't know if I watched all of it. Anyway, I digress. The original budget was planned to be $50 million at the time, which is $153.4 million when adjusted for inflation, but Disney felt that was too expensive. And when Who Framed Roger Rabbit was greenlit, the budget was changed to $30 million at the time, which is $92 million when adjusted for inflation, which was the most expensive animated film at the time. It was like planned to be the most expensive animated film at the time. Steven Spielberg convinced all the companies that owned the non-Disney cartoon characters to allow for their characters to appear in the film. Some studios had contracted stipulations on how their characters could be portrayed in the film. That's probably why, like, characters like Baby Herman are original characters, because if they were any other characters, like, I'm sure it would not be thought of kindly by studios. Outside of some of the original voice actors voicing the same characters in the film, the other studios had no involvement in the project other than allowing their characters to appear in it. So, like, they didn't have anybody come in. I think they approved some things when they heard some things, but other than that, I don't think they had any involvement at all. There was some drama when Warner Brothers executives wanted the Chuck Jones design for Daffy Duck, but animators were using the Bob Clampett design. And due to this, Robert Zemeckis had a separate team animate using the Chuck Jones design so that the other design could be used in the final film. So basically, he duped them. He's like, I have the final say, I go dupe. And the characters that they wanted the rights to but didn't acquire were Popeye, Tom and Jerry, Little Lulu, Casper the Friendly Ghost, the Terry Toons characters, Rocky and Bullwinkle, Bosco, Fitz the Dog, Bimbo, Flip the Frog, and Yankee Doodle? Or did I misspell Yankee Doodle? Despite getting the rights to Coco the Clown, King Features, who owned Coco the Clown, asked for $50,000 for the cameo. And to get around this, the animators redesigned, so they asked, they're like, yeah, you have permission, but you need to give us money. And so to get around this, the animators redesigned him to have hair like Bozo the Clown and changed his colors. The plan for Who Framed Roger Rabbit was to have no characters created after 1947 except for Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner because they were Robert Zemeckis' favorites. This actually doesn't happen, especially for Disney characters. And in some ways you could argue, oh, they were in development. And I'm like, it's kind of immersion breaking for me. Why is Alice there? You know, it kind of doesn't make sense to me because, yes, I mean, in a way, you could say, oh, they were filming their cartoons. Okay. Whatever you say. That's fine. Peter Renaday, who is best known for voicing Abraham Lincoln in the Hall of Presidents and Harry and Max in the Country Bear Jamboree, if we're talking about Disney things, originally portrayed Eddie in the original test footage in 1983. And animator Mike Gabriel portrayed him in publicity photos, while Joe Pantoliano played him in a screen test in 1986. Harrison Ford was Steven Spielberg's original choice to play Eddie Valiant, but Harrison Ford's asking price was a little too high. I mean, when you're making the highest budget animated movie in the world at the time, You don't want to spend money on actors. Chevy Chase was actually the next choice. I'm glad they didn't go with Chevy Chase. Horrible person. Chevy Chase was the next choice, but he had no interest. Eddie Murphy actually rejected the role after misunderstanding the concept, which is a decision he has later regretted. Others considered for the part were Bill Murray, although he couldn't be contacted. And that is also something that Bill Murray has said that he would do. And he's actually said that he's regretted that he missed out on that. Robert Redford, Robin Williams, Jack Nicholson, Paul Newman, Sylvester Stallone, Edward James Olmos, Wallace Shawn, Ed Harris, Charles Grodin, and Don Lane. I would be interested in a Robin Williams. I just don't think while I love Robin Williams and I love him in serious roles, I feel like he's too cartoony in his cartoony roles, you know? Like, I feel like he'd be a little bit too, like, I don't know if he could pull off the jaded, like, person in a cartoon world, if that makes sense. I don't know. But I do know, like, that ending scene, he would eat up. Anyway, Paul Rubens originally auditioned for Roger and provided the voice in the 1983 screen test, like I mentioned earlier. Eddie Dezen also auditioned for Roger, but the part went to, oh no, I'm going to butcher his last name, Charles Flesher? Sure, let's do that. Roger's lisp and catchphrase, oh my gosh, I've been able to do it, but the please catchphrase, I'm not going to do it. I do it really bad. Is a tribute to cartoon characters with speech impediments, and his performance is also inspired by Screwy Squirrel, which ironically is mentioned in the movie. To help with Bob Hoskins' performance, he actually dressed up as Roger on set and said his lines behind the camera. Like, it's just something he wanted to do. The original design for Roger, made by Michael Giammo, resembled Michael J. Fox, but animation director Richard Williams redesigned him to look the way we see in the final film. In Williams' own words, Roger is a combination of Tex Avery's head, Droopy's hair, Goofy's overalls, Porky Pig's bow tie, Mickey Mouse's gloves, Brer Rabbit's feet, and Bugs Bunny's cheeks and ears. Keep that in mind when we talk later. That there's some aspects of Bugs Bunny he's supposed to be and supposed to resemble. Steven Spielberg wanted Roger's mouth to look more like Thumper's, who I guess is his canonical uncle, or that was the intention. I don't remember if this is mentioned. Please correct me if it is. I've seen this movie a lot, but like, I don't remember him mentioning Thumper was his uncle. Hold on. Okay. According to my cursory research, meaning a Google search, he mentions that Thumper is his uncle, suggesting Roger's mother may be one of Thumper's sisters. Does this imply that Toon's age then? I don't like the implication, because that implies that Toon's age. It could be the Thumper from Bambi, but it could, I don't know, maybe Thumper's a common name for a bunny, like John or something, I don't know. But the note was ignored. I guess maybe we'll never know, because his mouth doesn't look like Thumper's. And Wile E. Coyote was a source of inspiration for Roger's expressions. Kathleen Turner voiced Jessica Rabbit, but she went uncredited. I don't necessarily know why, and she was cast due to Robert Zemeckis working with her in Romancing the Stone. I want to call it Romance in the Stone, but it's Romancing, ing, the Stone, which to me doesn't make sense, but that might just be me. And she accepted the role due to being pregnant at the time, and so a voice role was perfect. Her design was inspired by Rita Hayworth, Veronica Lake, and Lauren Bacall. Tim Curry originally auditioned for Judge Doom, but he apparently was too scary, so he got turned down. Christopher Lee was also considered, and John Cleese showed interest, but proved to not be scary enough for the role. Peter O'Toole, F. Murray Abraham, Roddy McDowell, Joe Mantegna? Sure. If you want the list of all these actors, they're readily available on the internet if I get any names wrong. Eddie Dezzine, who I talked about earlier, and Sting were all considered for the part. I don't know why Sting's there. I found it really weird. The part went to Christopher Lloyd, and he actually avoided blinking on camera. I think the main reason it went to Christopher Lloyd was because of Doc Brown in Back to the Future. But I think Christopher Lloyd is incredible, and we talk about that a little bit more in our thoughts. Lou Hirsch originally auditioned for a live-action character, but was cast as Baby Herman, describing the voice as a combination of Wallace Beery and what his British friends sound like when they imitate him. Baby Herman's design is a combination of Elmer Fudd and Tweety. Mel Blanc reprised his roles as Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig, Tweety, and Sylvester the Cat, with some help from his son, Noel Blanc. There was an intention for him to voice Yosemite Sam and Foghorn Leghorn, but those voices proved to be too strenuous on Blanc's vocal cords, so Joe Alaskey, replaced him. For inspiration when writing the film, the writers studied the golden age of animation from Disney and Warner Brothers, especially the Tex Avery and Bob Clampett cartoons. The Cloverleaf subplot was inspired by the movie Chinatown and real events from the time period. In the original novel, the Toons were comic strip characters rather than cartoon characters. The villain changed from draft to draft as the writers were unsure who the villain should be. One draft had Jessica as the villain and some had Baby Herman, but they ultimately decided on Judge Doom. Judge Doom was originally meant to have an animated vulture on his shoulder, but this was cut due to animation issues. That would, however, somehow stay with an action figure of him. So there's an action figure with him just having a sick vulture, which... power to you, man. So in the bar scene where Roger was supposed to get dipped, one of the other actors in the bar was supposed to say, "Aren't you gonna have like a trial or something?" And so Judge Doom was supposed to have a suitcase of 12 kangaroos to be a play on the phrase kangaroo court. And they would open up like the case and they would pop out, and they would have joeys that would pop out of their pouches to spell and like have little letters that spell "you're guilty." And this was cut due to technical issues and things with the animation. The Toon Patrol were supposed to be a parody of the Seven Dwarfs, but two were cut. So the joke is kind of null and void. Judge Doom was meant to be revealed as the one who killed Bambi's mother. It also was said that he was supposed to originally be a human and not a Toon, and there was supposed to be a joke that Valiant said about how whoever killed his brother probably killed Bambi. I don't know why this was cut. Probably because I killed Bambi's mother. Sorry, my husband likes that joke. I don't. He does. I digress. The dueling pianist scene was storyboarded to have Donald receive praise and ovation from the audience while Daffy got critics. I think Warner Brothers must have taken issue with this, so this was changed. Also in that scene, there was a frame where Daffy used a baby tied up by a rope to play the piano. That's a little dark. Richard Williams insisted that this be removed. There was an homage to Betty Boop at Robert Zemeckis' request, where her dress slid down to reveal some parts of her body. This was edited out in home media releases for obvious reasons, because it was probably a blink and you'll miss it thing, and it was a you had to be there thing, and at this time, home media releases were getting a lot of controversy for blink and you'll miss it moments. I chose not to talk about them, but there are some in this movie. There was originally a sequence for Marvin Acme's funeral, but this was cut due to pacing reasons. Possible titles for the film were Murder in Toontown, Toons, period, just Toons, Dead Toons Don't Pay Bills, The Toontown Trial, Trouble in Toontown, and Eddie Goes to Toontown. I like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I feel like it's best. Richard Williams refused to work on the production in Los Angeles, so all production had to be moved to London. Actually, most of production was moved to London. There was one studio in California, so some of the animation stayed in California, and some of it went to England and in London. But that meant that live action filming had to be done in London. And Disney and Spielberg promised that as a reward for helping with the film, they would distribute Richard Williams' unfinished film, The Thief and the Cobbler. I want to promote Yesterworld's video, and I know other people have done videos on The Thief and the Cobbler, but I want to promote his video on Who Framed Roger Rabbit because he talks about The Thief and the Cobbler and Richard Williams' attitude a lot better than I want to in this video, but just know he was a little bit of a pill and a perfectionist. The animation was split between the studio in Los Angeles and the studio in England. Like I stated earlier, the production budget continued to escalate and production delays began. It made Michael Eisner want to shut down production, but Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the something with animation, I can't remember, like chair or something, was able to talk him out of it. And the budget eventually escalated from $30 million at the time to the $50 million that was originally planned. And VistaVision cameras with motion-controlled technology were used for the live-action scenes that would have animation added in later. Rubber stand-ins for Roger, Baby Herman, and the Toon Patrol were used in rehearsal so that actors knew where to look. Many of the physical props used by the Toon characters were filmed with robotic arms or used strings and puppeteering. Some of them used sticks, so some of it was marionetted, kind of. Others were just strings, and some other ones were coming up from the floor, kind of like how you do the Muppets, if you've seen behind-the-scenes Muppet stuff. Bob Hoskins studied his daughter playing with imaginary friends in order to get the feel of talking to animated characters. He also said that, like, he had an issue with psychosis with, like, seeing these characters, like, after filming. Bob Hoskins also performed his own stunts in the film. Charles Fleischer, I think is how you pronounce his name, I don't know, insisted on wearing the Roger Rabbit costume in order to get into character, which I think I kind of mentioned earlier. CGI had been used sparingly in films. CGI and CG, computer graphics and computer graphic imaging, are kind of two different things. But CG had been used a little bit, and CGI had been used a little bit as well. But the technology was still primitive. Due to this, all the animation was done on cells and optical composting. I don't know what optical composting is, don't ask me. How the animation worked is that the animators and layout artists would receive black and white photos of live action scenes, aka photostats, and then the animation paper would be placed on top. It was after this that the animated characters would be drawn just on that animation paper, and there were complications due to Robert Zemeckis' camera moves, and the animators had to work out where and how to place the characters. To make sure that this didn't happen anymore, Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg met to figure out how to ground the animation in the reality of the movie. This meeting was like about an hour and a half long. Their solution was having the animation affect the real world of the movie. So, for example, like when we see Roger and he tries to sit in Teddy's dusty chair, we see his handprint. After the rough animation was complete, the basic cell photography process was executed, this time on a rostrum camera with no background. To create the dimensionalist of the animated characters, technicians animated 3 separate layers: shadows, highlights, and tone matte. The lighting effects were then optically composed to animated characters in order to fit into the lighting of the live-action footage, which they were then composited into. One of the most difficult animation effects was Jessica's sparkly dress in the ink and paint club scene, and the sequences were created using a plastic bag scratched with steel wool that they then filtered light through. Alan Silvestri, best known for scoring Back to the Future, Predator, one of my favorites, and this is actually so funny that this is one of my favorite film scores, and I'm finding out that they're written by the same person, because I love the score for this one, and I love the score for this movie I'm about to say, Father of the Bride, the 1991 version with Steve Martin in it. I love that movie. And Death Becomes Her, which also has good music, among so many others. He wrote the score for Who Framed Roger Rabbit and directed the London Symphony Orchestra for the recording. Apparently, the orchestra struggled with some things with the jazz style. Robert Zemeckis joked that the British just don't know how to play jazz. The music themes for Jessica Rabbit were actually improvised by a jazz combo. The work of composer Carl Stalling, who had composed the Warner Brothers cartoons, were influences for Silvestri's score. Michael Eisner and Roy E. Disney, who was, I'd like to say, like the head of animation or something at the time, felt the film had too many adult jokes and sexual themes. Eisner and Robert Zemeckis had disagreed over some aspects of the film, but Zemeckis had the final say in the cut and was not willing to change the film. Which, I agree. Like, this film, despite it, like, being, you know, adult-oriented, I love it, you know? Like, I like the grittiness it shows. I do agree it's not family-friendly. So I agree that their choice of releasing it under Touchstone Pictures, which was kind of their emerging, more adult production company at the time. Which it's weird because then they go and they're like, yeah, Romeo and Juliet. Sorry, not Romeo and Juliet. Nomeo and Juliet. Yeah, let's have that be a Touchstone. And I'm like, why couldn't Disney release that? That's just kind of crazy to me. Who Framed Roger Rabbit grossed $31.3 million when adjusted for inflation opening week, and it was the highest grossing movie that week in the United States box office. This was Disney's most successful opening weekend at the time of its release. Maybe. I mean, Snow White was pretty popular. We have some popular ones, but like when you talk about like the non-inflated box office, sure, yeah. I'm angry that box office doesn't concern, like, inflation sometimes. I'm sorry, I talked about that in my last video, I think. But it does kind of make me angry. Who Framed Roger Rabbit grossed $430.1 million when adjusted for inflation in the United States and Canada, and around $551 million when adjusted for inflation internationally. At the time of its release, it was the 20th highest grossing film of all time. It was also the second highest grossing film of 1988. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was met with critical acclaim, making Business Insider's best comedies according to critics' list. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was nominated for 6 Academy Awards: Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Visual Effects. It won 4: Best Film Editing, Best Sound Effects Editing, Best Visual Effects, and a special award for Richard Williams. You can ride the movie at Disneyland on Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin. He also, like, Roger kind of had a place in Disney merchandising, but I think some legal things have happened. Like, I don't know. 3 theatrical shorts were produced with the characters: Tummy Trouble, Roller Coaster Rabbit, and Trail Mix Up. In 2001, Disney got into legal trouble with the author of the original novel, Gary K. Wolfe. He filed a lawsuit stating he was owed royalties for the film. In 2002, it was ruled in the favor of Disney. But in 2004, the court found Wolfe's argument to have some merit. There were arguments about money and who owed who, and it was a whole back and forth thing. If you want to know more about it, I recommend you do your own research. And ultimately, it came to a decision in 2005, with Wolfe winning between $180,000 and $400,000, which is between $304,000 and $676,000 when adjusted for inflation. Steven Spielberg discussed the possibility of a sequel with J.J. Abrams as a writer and Robert Zemeckis as a producer. There was a prequel planned called Roger Rabbit: The Toon Patrol, which was to be set in somewhere between 1941 to 1943. This film would begin with Roger living on a farm in the Midwest, traveling west to visit his mother, meanwhile meeting Jessica. Apparently there's a live-action friend named Richie. He's not important. While Roger and Richie, I guess, are enlisting in the army, Jessica gets kidnapped to make pro-Nazi propaganda videos. Roger and Richie, I guess. I didn't mention Richie because I didn't want to, but now I guess I have to mention Richie. Roger and Richie must save her by going to Nazi Germany to save her along with other toons. Apparently it would be canonical that Bugs Bunny is his father. I can't remember if he mentions that. Okay, so this is not canon. This is not canon. So Bugs Bunny is not supposed to be Roger Rabbit's father, because it's never stated. This isn't like the Thumper thing. So Bugs Bunny was supposed to be his father, and I guess his mother is Thumper's sister. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, this did not end up happening as Spielberg left the project after not wanting to satirize Nazis after he directed Schindler's List. Valid. That is very valid. Very valid. Eisner wanted a rewrite for the sequel in 1997, keeping the plot about Roger searching for his mother and replacing the World War II plot with Roger's rise to stardom. Alan Menken was hired to write 5 songs and served as executive producer. The test footage was shot in 1998, trying to integrate CGI into the process, but the result did not please Disney. The second test was done completely in CGI, but this was dropped after the budget soared past $100 million. So just due to budget reasons, it was kind of canceled. There's a whole thing about a sequel. So let's go through it. In April of 2009, Robert Zemeckis revealed he was still interested. According to a 2009 news story, they were writing a new script for the project, and animated characters would be motion capture. So 2-dimensional animation and motion capture. I don't like motion capture. I think that it makes me want to vomit. Anyway, in 2010, Bob Hoskins had agreed to sign on for a sequel, but was kind of skeptical of performance capture and motion capture. And Robert Zemeckis said that the sequel would remain hand-drawn and with live action sequences, but the lighting effects would be done digitally. But also then Bob Hoskins retired in 2012 and then died in 2014. So and then Zemeckis stated that it would be possible. February of 2013, Gary K. Wolfe was working on a development proposal for a buddy comedy starring Mickey Mouse and Roger Rabbit, based on The Stooge. And it was supposed to be a prequel taking place 5 years before. And part of it is about how he met Jessica. So apparently this is really still happening. Wow. This is crazy. So there's kind of multiple sequels going on during this time. November 2016, Zemeckis would move from the world of the 50s. The sequel would feature a digital Bob Hoskins, Eddie Valiant returning in ghost form. That's crazy. Yeah. It doesn't seem like we're gonna get this. And even last year, Gary K. Wolf had all the rights returned to him because he's working on a film of one of his novels that has to do with that universe. Okay. Sorry, all that drama. If you want to read about that, that's all on the Wikipedia. It's crazy. Anyway. In December of 2016, the Library of Congress inducted Who Framed Roger Rabbit to be preserved. And that is all I have for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So thank you for watching up to this point, and I hope you stay to listen to my husband and I's thoughts. So we just finished Roger Rabbit. Sorry, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And I don't know what's to say about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. There's so much and yet so little.
I mean, just starting out with something we talked about tonight, I really like the presentation of their world. Not just the Toontown side, but even the non-Toontown side.
I just really like how the movie is. I don't think it would have worked if it was set in like the time period it came out in, which was like what, 1980s, like late 80s.
I guess we're looking at the 88.
Yeah, 88. So late 80s. I don't think it would have worked. I like the time, like the height of the cartoon world. I like that time period. And I like the kind of film noir vibe. Something we talked about is that we've obviously seen this movie before. Mm-hmm. And we have obviously seen it together before. I think actually we rewatched this movie like less than a year ago.
Well, yeah, like I feel like, well, even that, I think it was just a few months ago we last saw it.
Yeah, that's why I said less than a year ago. Yeah. So maybe within the last 6 months we've rewatched this movie because we love this movie. I have a few movies that I watch when I'm like sick or try to do like a yearly rewatch, and this is one of them. It's Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In fact, I was partway through this movie, probably because I watched it the last time I was sick. So
that tracks.
So I really do. I love this movie, and that's why I decided to do it when I was asked to, because I really adore this movie. And any chance to talk about this movie is great. What's the rating? PG?
It's a generous PG.
That's a very generous PG.
I think I would put
it doesn't really swear. It doesn't really...
a few cusses. Nothing serious.
Nothing serious.
There is a lot of alcohol and substance abuse.
Yes, that is definitely a theme. Because Eddie is definitely an alcoholic.
Well, not just Eddie, but they also use it for multiple gags and stuff. Like they have the baby, what is his name, Baby Herman. Mm-hmm. They have him smoke, and they have, you know, the scene at the bar with Roger Rabbit where he gives him the alcohol and stuff. Mm-hmm. So like it's kind of a running gag, and I get it. It's the time period that was kind of the common joke of classic cartoons, was using alcohol and tobacco, and it was. I mean, if you've seen Looney Tunes and stuff, that was a really common joke that they would do. Is they would have it take place in a bar, or they would have, you know, a character walk in with like a giant cigar in their mouth, and that was kind of the joke, was how overplayed that was.
I haven't seen Looney Tunes in years because I used to watch them at my grandparents' house. But I just like, I really love this movie. Oh, another content thing. There are some things having to do with sex. I know I said at the top of my episode that this would be a PG-13 thing, and it is a PG-13 thing. I know it's rated PG, but it's 80s PG, which means proceed with caution.
Yeah. I would say I think the references are relatively tame, but they are still references of something you would want to be wary about if you had kids.
I agree. I definitely think I watched this movie quite a bit too young. Oh, the other content warning I'm going to say. Depending on your little, if your little would be easily spooked like I was as a kid, the Judge Doom scene at the end terrified me.
Yeah, the final duel. That didn't freak me out as a kid, but also as a kid, I had seen a few other movies, and I was more, since I was not grown up in the time when the movie was released, it was kind of like not very believable special effects, if that makes sense. So I was kind of like, wow, those are some goofy special effects.
It wasn't believable, but it scared me. It's the way that they frame it and the way that they set it up. Like, it's definitely terrifying. Okay, because I'm talking about Judge Doom, I have to. Christopher Lloyd's performance in this movie, this might be my favorite Christopher Lloyd character of all time. And that includes, like, Back to the Future.
I would say I think the more roles I've seen of Christopher Lloyd, I really, really love Doc Brown, but I do love a lot of his other roles too. We were talking about The Woodsman. Is an absolute.
I forgot The Woodsman.
I know, it's from brain just shut off.
Over the
Garden Wall. Thank you. Absolutely S tier role. I think he has done, and one of my favorite acting roles of an animated character.
Over the Garden Wall.
But I also think he was really, really good as Judge Doom. Like, he's just a fantastic actor.
He's just crazy.
Like, I can't think of many roles that he's striked out on.
Anyway.
But regardless, yeah, he did a really, really good role as Judge Doom. I do really, really like. It's just funny because he normally doesn't play villains. Like, I can't think of any other roles where he's played a villain.
I'm sure somebody's going to put it in the comments and we're going to say we haven't seen that.
I was like, yeah, so I haven't seen it.
Apparently, because I looked it up, and I was like, he does really good voice acting. He's still doing stuff and voice acting and stuff, and he's getting up there.
Yeah.
You know, and so power to you, Christopher Lloyd. You're a fantastic actor, and it's so crazy. We talked about it because we were talking about the bar scene where Judge Doom comes in, and like we were talking about how this it's kind of a lighthearted parody of the film noir comedy until Judge Doom comes in, and it's like, oh no,
yeah,
and everything gets serious, and you're like, oh no, and it's just like that suspense. Something else we talked about was just how ambitious this film is compared to any other live action and traditional animation hybrids, especially the ones before this. Like if you take Three Caballeros and Saludos Amigos and Mary Poppins, those had selective scenes where they blend the two together.
Yeah.
But this one, it's practically the entire movie.
Yeah. Well, not only practically the whole movie, but practically the point of the movie.
Yeah, and it is. And I love, like, now we can talk about the world building, because I love the world building here. And I love how it's so immersive, and you can just believe. Like, there's cartoons and they hang out with each other. Donald Duck and Daffy Duck play Franz Liszt.
Yeah, like
every single night.
And they violently beat each other every single time because they hate each other.
And you know what the funniest thing is? I'm going to tell you this because I learned this in music history. Franz Liszt created music for performance art. So he created these really weird things so that it was performance art. And so I feel like it's a full circle moment. I don't know if Franz Liszt was rolling in his grave, finding out that Donald Duck and Daffy Duck was performing a piece he wrote. But I think it would really, like, for the writers behind being like, okay, so we want them to play a piece. What are they going to play? Somebody chiming in, who's a classical music connoisseur, saying, how about they play Liszt?
Well, I also feel like I've heard that piece get used in, like, very wacky, silly, kind of that, like, vaudeville Broadway type of humoristic act. I feel like I've heard that song used before in it.
Well, Franz Liszt is just a very performative. Yeah, let's use performative composer. Yeah. In many different ways and in many different regards. But yes, to continue. Just that world and like having Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny hang out, you know, all these things, and like, I don't know, like, yeah, Dumbo would work for Peanuts, you know, stuff like that. And I don't know, just these real world things that were happening. And I think something I really appreciated that I noticed is I Googled it because I had to make sure. It takes place in a specific year, is what they're specifically penning. And I don't believe there are any animated characters, at least in the Disney canon, because kind of self-proclaimed expert in the Disney canon up till now at this point.
Yeah, I can't really vouch for the Looney Tunes side. I mean, I know a bit about that, but I don't know that much.
Yeah, so we can't vouch for the Looney Tunes side, but we can say that everything is period accurate, even like up to Song of the South, which is in this movie. I am shocked that nobody has said anything about Song of the South characters being in this movie.
You know something I was thinking about? Maybe this just wasn't the case at the time, but isn't Tom and Jerry owned by owned by Warner Brothers? You think they would have appeared?
When did they come out?
Oh, that definitely would have been in this time, I'm pretty sure.
Google that. Anyway, so...
Yeah, 1940.
Maybe they were there and we just didn't notice.
I was like, I didn't see them.
I don't know, but also some things were...
No, Warner Brothers acquired them in 96. So
they
Warner
would
Brothers
not have
wouldn't
been
have
able,
had Tom and Jerry.
So they wouldn't have done any of the Hanna-Barbera stuff. Is that Hanna-Barbera? Who does Tom and Jerry?
They were MGM.
MGM.
They were just their own thing.
So I don't think any of the MGM. I think it's quite literally, just Warner Brothers and Disney stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the only way they could get Warner Brothers stuff is because Steven Spielberg and Warner Brothers were tight. Mm-hmm. Warner Brothers, Universal, and whatever. And at this time, actually, Steven Spielberg was Steven Spielberg. So Steven Spielberg could actually have whatever he wanted because he was Steven Spielberg, you know? And in a way, he is still Steven Spielberg, you know? Yeah. Like, but at this time, he was still, like, E.T. had already come out. He had already had his boom. Yeah. Probably, like, a few years.
Didn't he do Goonies also? I'm pretty sure he did Goonies.
I don't know.
But regardless, you know, he was known as a director.
Yeah. Anyway, continuing on. I love Jessica Rabbit. I love Jessica Rabbit because she represents just the problem that women have when they are pretty or sexy, and that is their appearance, and everything that they say is misconstrued in a way, and everything that they do is misconstrued because people believe it is inherently in that way when it's not, you know. And so I feel like she represents that problem with women. And I love the line, "I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way," because Jessica acknowledges that she understands she cannot control how she is, how she was drawn, how she is perceived outwardly in a way. And in a way, you can find these ways of quiet rebellion in her. In her act, you could perceive it as doing a kind of playing hard to get thing, Or you could perceive it as in, I actually don't want this, but I know this is what I need to do for a living. Actually kind of stay away from me. And I actually kind of don't want to do this, but this has to be my gig. This is the only thing I can do.
Yeah.
And I like that throughout the movie, we slowly see more and more parts of her, her personality develop. And in a way, she is very integral to the climax. She's the one that, sorry, spoilers here. We're going to get into spoilers because we got to talk about plot. She's the one that sees Judge Doom kill R.K. Maroon. So without her, that entire climax is kind of just null and void and done.
The other thing I wanted to point out about her, and this kind of relates to what you were talking about how she not really develops, but I would imagine that she is, because of, like you said, the situation you've talked with her and the way she's drawn, if she kind of like puts on a mask, if that makes sense. You definitely see that with her as a character in the beginning, like when she's interacting with Mr. Acme, or when she's, in the office of Eddie, talking to him, or Detective Valiant, sorry. I gotta use the proper term. Eddie. But you get what I mean. Of Eddie talking to him, her face doesn't really move much to express like how people do. It's very, very, for lack of a better term, like solemn, like an owl is talking to you. Very quiet and reserved and knows what she wants. But then as kind of like the plot progresses, she cracks jokes. Like she starts making jokes and stuff in the story. And then she starts becoming more and more expressive. And then even all the way up in the end, she's completely causing gags and stuff that you would not expect from the beginning of the film.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, it's like, why are you in love with Roger? Well, he makes me laugh. I think it's also that she doesn't feel the need to be this person that she has to perform. Mm-hmm. She doesn't feel the need to perform for him the way that she has to perform for others, and that others expect her to perform based on her looks. And I just feel like this represents what quite a few women have to do in their lives.
And you know what's different with Roger? IQ.
Well, I just think he doesn't care. He just...
Yeah, I know. That's probably more realistically, but,
He loves her the way she is. And I think that, I don't know. They're the prime example of... I don't know. I said a lot of things during the movie. But, like, they're the prime example of me versus the baddie I got by being autistic.
Yeah.
If you know that meme.
Well, because, like, when you think about it, okay, maybe this is something I would expect to hear from you, is what I'm going to say when I say this. But Roger totally has savant syndrome. He where he's like... So savant syndrome is when a person who's autistic is typically handicapped in 99% of fields, like intelligence or cognitive ability and the such, but they usually have one specific thing that they are way above the curve on. A fantastic example of savant syndrome is Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. He is like savant syndrome, like poster child. I feel like Roger Rabbit is kind of similar, but a different kind, where rather than like an intellectual smarts that Sheldon has, Roger is more like in humor and kind of in extroversion, if that makes sense. He knows how to get people to like him and how to make them laugh. But I don't know, just something I was saying. I know we were joking about him being autistic, but like I could kind of see it. I could see him having like savant syndrome or something. But he's a toon. They're all eccentric. They're all silly. So like it's not really that crazy to expect something else. But I was just saying,
So like the foreshadowing in this movie is so good, except for there's one moment we talked about, and it's like, what's his problem? A toon killed his brother. And I'm
Yes.
like, oh my gosh, because we talked about it. And we're like, look at all the wonderful foreshadowing throughout this movie. That one just stands out like a sore frickin' thumb. Like,
Yeah.
and we were even talking about it. And then there's the scene in the movie theater where he explains what happens to Roger. And it's like,
I feel like that should have been the scene where
that should have been the scene where that got
Yeah.
brought up, because you would know, like, it's set up before that his brother has passed away.
Me, while I agree, and I fully agree with you, of that original setup probably should not have happened, I feel like I've heard of that being a stereotype in noir films, where people are like talking in the background, oh, he's had this secret past. He was in a relationship with this character before things went sour or whatever. Like, I feel like that's kind of what they're trying to play on, but it doesn't work in this movie very well. And I think that's because it's mainly parody of noir. A small other aside, while we were on the topic of Eddie, I was trying to remember because I couldn't remember any other roles he's played. Do you know who he's played? He's played Mario in the 1980s Mario Brothers movie.
Shut up.
He is. It's him.
Shut up. That's not him.
Bob Hoskins. I gotta see if I can get a good picture of it.
Shut up. That's not, no.
That is him.
Shut up. Wait, whoa,
Sorry, not 80s, 90s.
I need to see a picture. Hold on.
If I can get a good picture. There's only a trailer on IMDb for some reason. Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
You can't tell because of the mustache, but that's him.
Oh, no, I can tell. Holy cow.
Yeah. I was like, I knew I recognized him from something. But also, good acting in this one. Like, Eddie Valiant, Bob did a really good job acting as Eddie. I really liked the gag scene where he's trying to make all of they're not hyenas, are they? Weasels. He's making all the weasels laugh, and he's doing all the different gags and stuff. I don't know if all of them were done by him or if some were a stunt double, but if they were done by him, the really good role on that. He did a good job.
Yeah, I think all of this is acted amazingly well for what it blends the parody so well with the actual, like, realism of it. Because here's the thing, when you have a toon walking around, we can believe anything. But, like, then it's a parody, but it's not so silly goofy that it's not real. Like, we believe in the hijinks. Like, it just blends and toes that line so well.
How I would say it is it's a parody that takes itself seriously. It makes me think of, like, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is very similar, where it's very clearly parody. You know, they even do jokes where they're laughing at the audience, you know, like fourth wall breaking type of jokes. And, like, but they're still, like, trying to take themselves very seriously in their humor. And I feel like Who Framed Roger Rabbit is similar.
Yeah. Definitely a fun watch. Yeah, Touchstone. I actually think that this might be one of the first Touchstone movies. This might have created the formation of Touchstone, if that makes sense.
At least Touchstone that people really care about. Because there's like this and E.T.
E.T. is Touchstone?
I'm pretty sure it's Touchstone.
I don't think so.
Let me see. I feel like I remember it being...
One of my favorite Touchstone pictures is Three Men and a Baby. I really like that one.
Oh, no, it was Universal. Okay, never mind.
Ha. Well, because the E.T. ride is at Universal Studios.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we really like Roger Rabbit, and if you are of the older persuasion, I'd recommend it for you too. Especially if you're watching this channel.
it was nice to see some fun faces again. And it was sad to know that some people were not being voiced by the original voice actors. Like, Clarence Nash missed the cut, like, died, like, a few years before this film was made. So just knowing, like, they brought back a lot of other, like, cartoon voices, but knowing that they couldn't bring back Clarence Nash puts a little sad part in my heart, you know, because I did say in my Mickey's Christmas Carol video that he had passed away, I think, in the next few years after that. Maybe, I know that was his last role, and his last one as Donald.
Smile, Donya, smile.
Close enough. Okay, thank you so much for liking. Thank you so much for commenting. And thank you so much for subscribing.
Bye-bye.
What he said.